McCrispy strips are now at McDonald's. Tender, juicy, and its own sauce. Would you look at that? Well, you can't see it, but trust me, it looks delicious. New McCrispy strips, now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy, comfy. I'm cozy, cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes, blisters. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Globally, humans are facing massive problems that are widely ignored by governments and the media.
Like personal space invaders.
I had it with these couples that sit on the same side of the booth.
Yak mouths.
Stupid stick figure bumper stickers.
Almond milk. You cannot milk an almond.
Hi, I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Angie.
We call her Pumps, and we're the hosts of I've Had It. Pumps, tell the listener where they can find us.
Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Nailed it.
See you next Tuesday.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we examine some of the theories behind the disappearance of Trevor Deely. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my indefatigable co-host, Alice.
Hi, Brett. You know, hope springs eternal. I wish that were me.
It's totally you.
But I'm so
Alice.
fatigable all the time.
You are not fatigable. You're indefatigable, much like the glorious Irish revolutionaries who won their independence.
That's so nice. Well, so, you know, this is kind of a later night. I mean, it's pretty on par with when we normally record. But, like, every time I start recording, I'm like, you can do it, Alice. I, like, have to pep talk myself into it. Not because I don't love talking to you, but because I am fatigued.
Yeah.
That's okay.
That's why you need... That's what the whiskey's for. The whiskey will pep you up.
Dude, that whiskey will put this fatigued Alice straight to bed.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, too.
Straight to bed.
It always has one of two effects, right?
That's the effect
It
it
either
has
wakes
on
you
me.
up or it puts you to sleep.
If I smell it, it'll wake me up. If I drink it, I'll go straight to night-night. But
There you
with
go.
all that
Well, that makes
said,
sense.
okay, we can't be tired today because we have hit theories on the Trevor Deely case, and I'm excited to talk about these theories, but really, Brett, I know we like touted your theory last time so much that I'm hoping we get to at least introduce your theory because you guys are about to get like Professor Brett in, you know, history class, which
I don't know that
everybody
I can
loves
do
it.
an entire episode on my theory, so I think it's best if we can get to it today. But we'll see, because we don't rush anything.
See. We don't. No one can.
Yeah.
No one has ever called us short-winded.
It's true. And some of you are probably surprised that we're already to theories. We've only had one episode, but that's a testament to how little actual evidence there really is in this case. And as we go through the theories, I think you're going to see that. To recap for those of you who might have forgotten, Trevor Deely, ordinary young guy working at a bank. He's doing IT work. It's close to Christmas time. They're having the Christmas party. He goes out to the Christmas party. has a lot to drink, great time with his friends, everything seems fine. Very late at night, he starts walking home, but there's a cab strike and he lives more than a mile away and it's pouring down rain, so he decides, I'm going to go get an umbrella at the office. And as he heads that way, suddenly into the camera frame is the man in black, the sort of mysterious person who's dressed all in black, standing out in the rain without an umbrella, almost seemingly waiting for someone. He talks to Trevor as he arrives at the back gate of where he works, which is a bank of sorts, the Bank of Ireland Asset Management Company. He sort of hangs around outside while Trevor goes inside, but Trevor spends, 30 minutes. He sees a friend, has some coffee. At some point, the man in black sort of walks away. We then catch Trevor leaving. He's heading in the direction of his home. He's caught by another camera on a bank. And he passes by, and a few seconds later comes a man in black. Whether it's the man in black is hard to say, but another person dressed all in black who seems to be following Trevor. According to sort of things you read and whether or not this is true or not, the Garda, which is the police in Ireland, have been able to enhance that second video some, and apparently the enhanced video, it appears even more as though this is the same person. That's an important fact, because if it is the same person, awful coincidental that you see them 2 different times in 2 different places near Trevor, and very shortly after he leaves that camera, it appears he disappears because he's never viewed on any other camera. Obviously, there are a lot more CCTV cameras in Dublin today than there were at the time, but there were a lot then, as evidenced by the fact he was caught on 3 different cameras, but he's not caught on any more. And I think most people believe that at some point after he leaves that 3rd camera, he disappears either due to accident or due to some sort of homicide or some sort of kidnapping. And we're going to go through all those theories and see if we can come to a conclusion on what happened here. And we will start with a theory that I think is in some ways the most popular. And it's one that we've talked about before, and it's one that always comes up whenever anyone disappears near a body of water. And that's the very simple and straightforward theory that Trevor fell into the river. Now, we know for a fact that Trevor did cross the river. He did cross a bridge, and he may have crossed more than one. Is it possible that in his sort of drunken state, he just fell in? If you've seen the video of him passing the bank, he is not walking in a straight line. Now, he's not stumbling, falling down drunk, but he's definitely walking like someone who's had a lot to drink, someone who's been drinking for the better part of 8 hours at this point. He's weaving sort of back and forth. Is it possible that at some point he weaves over the side of a bridge? I guess it's possible, though honestly, it seems unlikely. Nothing of Trevor's was ever found, including his rather large umbrella. And this is one of the things. It's one thing to say that maybe his body would have disappeared, but the umbrella was this huge thing. It was Bank of Ireland branded umbrella. There was a big search for Trevor. You would think that would have been found. The Garda did an extensive search of the river and surrounding canals. They found nothing, and they have a pretty good diving team, and that diving team was basically unequivocal that if he had been in the river, they would have found him. There's always a possibility that that's not true. I don't think you can ever rule this kind of theory out completely, but they didn't find any evidence of him. There's also Trevor's phone. Trevor's phone continued to ring, which indicates to some that it was not underwater. This is always controversial. Some people believe, and some people will say, and even some people in technology will say, that if a phone is submerged underwater, it kills the phone, particularly one in 2000. And from that point forward, the phone wouldn't ring. Any calls would go straight to voicemail. We know that Trevor's phone continued to ring into the next day, which seems to indicate it was not underwater. People often end up in this river. This is a river that people drown in, unfortunately, and they also tend to be found. It is a good ways from Dublin to the sea, and the river itself is rather docile. I mean, this is not a river you're going to be swept down. This is the kind of river where a body is going to wash up. But that didn't happen, and it just is the case that people do not tend to fall into the river in Dublin and never be found again. So if that's what happened to Trevor, this case is remarkable in its sort of unremarkableness. It is remarkable that Trevor could have died and disappeared like that, because it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and like Brett said, if he's weaving, he's clearly not totally sober. But remember, he was inside his office building for at least half an hour and had a cup of coffee and had a whole conversation with somebody, who didn't indicate that he was, say, blackout drunk or anything like that. So even if he wasn't completely sober, he wasn't at a point where he absolutely could not have walked across that bridge without falling over. And so that's something to keep in mind too. He'd been drinking for a long time that night, but he'd also had a sobering coffee and kind of been in the dry with a coworker talking for some time before he made this trip across the river. And that umbrella really gets me, Brett, because I think of all the pieces of an umbrella, how it's difficult to make an umbrella just kind of disappear in the water. It's made of metal, it's large, it tends to float, especially if something breaks on it, it'll kind of pop open, making it even larger than its original size. It's a very distinctive looking umbrella that it wouldn't, necessarily just be passed over as would, say, maybe a shoe or a wallet, something like that. So this, in some ways, is Occam's razor, right? Because there's a river right there. And oftentimes, with a lot of drinking in a river, the first and most obvious answer is not foul play, but rather, a tragic accident. But I don't know. It's hard not to find a single trace in the canal. This isn't like a river that flowed into the ocean. Eventually it went to the ocean, but it took some time. And the Garda was on it in terms of searching pretty quickly. Now, that leads us to another also popular theory then, and that's that Trevor disappeared on his own. Now, it's always a possibility suggested in these types of cases, but here it really does seem unlikely. There's no evidence of a disappearance, and there's no indication that Trevor was in a place emotionally or psychologically where he'd want to disappear. He had taken no steps to start this new life. So, we've talked about what you look for. You look to see if someone's emptied their accounts, sold their possessions to prepare for a new life. There's none of that here. He had taken no money out of his account and nothing was missing from his apartment. It seems like he never went back into the apartment at all. So not a change of clothes, not, some way to get around, not passports, nothing like that. And so of course people can disappear just by walking out of their own lives, but it's really hard to start your life completely anew without anything to help you start that next life. And it doesn't seem like he took any steps here to do that. So another potential option then is that Trevor had an argument while he had been drinking that night out, either maybe at the pub where he was pre-gaming or at the club, or he'd been drinking for many hours. Obviously with drinking, sometimes heightened emotions come, and maybe he got out of sorts with someone and someone was angry at him and wanted revenge. This can't be ruled out. People can get bad-tempered drinking and fights happen, especially after 8+ hours of drinking in a kind of a festive mood. However, Trevor wasn't alone. He wasn't just drinking by himself. Remember, he was with colleagues all night before, both before he went to the party and at the party, and he was with a coworker, once he got to his office building. And there was seemingly no mention of a fight or even an argument by any of these colleagues who were with him at any point throughout the night. Also, that level of response where someone wants such revenge that they're going to kidnap or murder Trevor seems just really extreme, because we don't see anything on CCTV where it would indicate that there's, high emotions running. He doesn't seem flustered. He doesn't seem to be in a state of anger. The person in black who he speaks to very briefly, that doesn't seem to be a heated conversation right there. We see him coming in and out of the party, to go to the ATM. We don't see anyone follow him. He doesn't seem frustrated at the ATM as he's getting money. And none of his body language suggests that this is a night full of high emotions. But on the other hand, maybe he didn't know he had angered someone so much. Maybe he'd just been seen flirting with the wrong girl or something like that, where he didn't even realize he was offending someone. And so it could be that we don't see any behavioral changes in him throughout the night, and no one around him recognizes that anyone else is mad at him because the person he has offended is seething over something that Trevor is just completely oblivious to. Now, if the offended person, say maybe a boyfriend or a husband, happened to be in a gang or, kind of with a rougher crowd, they could have had the means and contacts to get back at Trevor. The problem with this is the same as many of the theories. If there was a hit out on Trevor for some revenge, why wasn't his body found? Especially if it's a random attack. Hiding a body is almost as dangerous as killing someone. And most criminologists agree that hiding a body tends to indicate either a more organized attack or someone who knew the victim, which does not fit with this theory of someone who just was angry about some kind of random flirtation or something that Trevor did that he was unaware of.
The timing also doesn't seem right. It seems hard to believe that he would get into an argument with someone, and then what? They kind of followed him at a distance while he went to the bank and then waited off camera until he left and then followed him again. I guess you would have to assume that the second man in black might be this person and that the first man in black is a complete random person. I don't know. It just doesn't, it feels like if that's what happened, he never would have made it to the bank. It seems like somebody would have attacked him on his way to work, not after he got there and hung out for 30 minutes and got his umbrella and left. To me, in addition to all the other problems you've identified, it just feels really unlikely that this is some random heat of the moment angry person that he offended that night.
Yes, and it seems like it would be if this were like a targeted attack by a random person because they were, an angered boyfriend or husband, it would take some time to mobilize because Trevor's not known to them.
Right, exactly. And I don't know. I think some of the other criminal possibilities we're going to discuss, I think, are a little bit more likely. One of those, a theory that some people suggest, is that Trevor had some sort of drug debt and was on the wrong side of a gang. At that time, even now, and everybody knows this, drugs and especially cocaine, very commonplace in white-collar businesses. Apparently, this was something that was very common in Dublin's South Inner City at the time. You got a big corporate party. You don't have to have watched a lot of American Psycho to know that the corporate party scene often involves drugs. So it's possible that Trevor somehow got involved with some sort of drug dealer. The problem is, it's never really been confirmed that Trevor was into drugs or that was the kind of thing he would have been involved in. Drug dealers, they were common around that area. It wouldn't have been hard to find somebody. This was before you had cell phones and the internet, so that's a possibility. But not only did people say that Trevor wasn't into this kind of thing, his bank account doesn't really show it. Trevor wasn't running out of money. There was no extreme or regular spending that you would expect if somebody had a big drug habit and a big drug debt. And so while this idea of sort of an organized gang that decided Trevor had to go and picked this night, while it seems more attractive than the random attack, it also seems like it's pretty much full of holes. If Trevor had any kind of debt, it wouldn't have been very big, and killing someone over a small drug debt, pretty dumb because, number one, it's dangerous. Number two, you don't ever get paid. Once again, why hide his body? If you're killing him over this, look, drug dealers, people who kill people over drugs, they don't hide the body. They kill somebody in sort of a random attack. The body's found in the street. The police never figure it out, and they move on with their lives. The idea that they would kill Trevor and then spirit him away is pretty hard to believe. Now, police, they did not dismiss this idea out of hand. They actually spent a lot of time working through the prison system in Ireland, talking to people in prison, talking to their informants, trying to find out some information about what had happened to Trevor. And in fact, in 2017, they did have an informant who claimed that Trevor had been murdered by a gang as a result of some sort of drug deal gone wrong, and his body was buried in a field. The police actually searched that field. They didn't find anything related to Trevor, though they did find drugs and a gun. So it seems like the informant had some information, but maybe not the right information. We've talked about informants before. Oftentimes their information is incomplete, if not wrong altogether. And it seems like this informant didn't really know what they were talking about.
And we've talked about this before too. You're like, well, why would the informant give them information about Trevor, especially if it leads to, guns and drugs? sometimes you're just bored in prison, or you want to work off some time, so you provide information, or maybe they just heard it through the grapevine themselves because people talk in prison. So this type of information we've talked about so much. It's hard to trust informants, especially if they have something to get out of it, like maybe good time served if they are able to help the police, or just out of sheer boredom. They hear things and they want to pass it along because everyone wants to appear like they have helpful information. So it does sound like this person probably had heard of a field before, and why not? Just like we're talking about this as a theory, Trevor could have been, murdered by a gang. That happens, and this gang probably did murder people, just maybe not Trevor. Okay, more theories. We're gonna churn through these, and none of these seem satisfying yet. And if you're not satisfied, stick around, because I agree. And part of this is it's so unsatisfying because there's been nothing found of Trevor at all. His body, his possessions, nothing. And that's why this is such a mind-boggling case. But stick with us. We'll keep going through some theories with you to explore all the possibilities. So another theory is that Trevor had been visiting prostitutes in the nearby illicit brothels. Because remember that area of town we talked about? There were sex workers. There were also, you could buy drugs in this area. It wasn't terribly dangerous, but it was not maybe the best place to be walking at night. So it is possible that he could have been hiring a sex worker that night and had gotten into some trouble with the pimps, who obviously keep control of the books and the money, and you do not want to get on the wrong side of these guys. Now, that area by the canal was known as a hub for the illegal sex trade, and Trevor was a young man. He had no girlfriend. Remember that Alaska trip we talked about? Whether that factors into what's going on here at all, I think it at least shines some light on some difficulties that Trevor had in connecting with women. He clearly misread that entire situation. He took a cross-world trip to go visit this woman who did not want him there at all, and he did not woo her while he was in Alaska. So at least in recent history, he did not have the best luck with connecting with women. And we know that Trevor worked in the area and he had a well-paying job, which meant that he could afford to hire a woman to have sex with if that's what he wanted. It's possible that he had visited prostitutes in local brothels on occasion and had either witnessed something or done something that led to those brothels or the pimps targeting him. We have no evidence of this, though. We have no evidence that he did visit any brothels. And if he did, and if some pimp was mad at him, the problem is that pimps don't normally kill their customers, especially the good ones. The good ones are the ones who pay, and Trevor definitely had the money to pay. And so that's just not usually the kind of revenge they take out on someone. And once again, if you're going to target Trevor because you're mad at him for something, why hide the body? Why not just leave him for dead in the middle of the street? Make it look like an accident, or it could be blamed on a number of people. It doesn't have to tie back to you. But more fundamentally, this theory, as with the other ones we've talked about, just has no evidence to support it, other than the fact that this area did have some brothels.
And I think for a lot of people, this random act of violence theory, whatever reason you have for it, drugs, sex workers, wrong girl hit on, has a lot of attractiveness because it feels less conspiratorial, it feels less complex. None of these ring true to me. None of the random acts of violence type things ring true. There is absolutely no evidence of it. And usually these kind of attacks are messy. They're not the kind of attacks that result in no evidence. Usually there's a lot of evidence. Even if you can't figure out who did it because it's random, you know there was a murder. And you have a body, and you don't have that here. And to me, I think that and this man in black leads you to think there's something a little bit more complex going on here. So let's talk about some of the more complex theories. One is that Trevor had seen some info in the IT department of the bank asset management section, and this was an organized hit to silence him. This would obviously be on a larger level of conspiracy than what we've talked about so far. The Bank of Ireland Asset Management Center certainly would have had important clients back then. Trevor was working in the IT section in a small team, so even though normally you might think a 22-year-old guy, very entry-level type guy, how is he going to have access to this kind of information? Because he's in IT, he has access to all kinds of information, and perhaps he found evidence of some sort of wrongdoing either by a client or by some senior bank managers. And in order to prevent him from blowing the whistle, he may have been permanently silenced. The fact it all happened on a work night out and that it revolved around Trevor's workplace does suggest a link. This is kind of like the ghost theory. Did you ever watch Ghost, Alice? The movie?
Of course.
Yes. Wonderful movie. Terrific movie.
It was a little bit before my time. I'm not going to talk about how you're older than me, but I definitely did watch it.
Well, this, for those of you who've seen it and remember it, this is kind of the ghost theory where you have a guy who has some information. He doesn't even realize what he has, but because of that, he is silenced. But the problem with this is it makes for a good Hollywood movie, but do we really have any evidence of it? No, we don't. The level of collusion you would need in keeping this a secret for this long really stretches the imagination. And no wrongdoing has ever been uncovered, despite all the scrutiny surrounding the circumstances of Trevor's death. If people intended for this to be a quiet murder, that's not what it was. It became incredibly famous in Ireland and was really looked into with a lot of detail. So you would think, even if you did this to cover something up, you might accidentally end up revealing what you were doing, and that has never happened.
And, we're talking about the Bank of Ireland. This isn't some small family-owned business with a couple of employees. This is like a huge bank. And Trevor, as good of an employee as he is, he's not like the executive team. He's not the CEO, the COO. He's relatively young. He's a young guy in his 20s, working a good job, but relatively speaking, lower on the totem pole. It kind of stretches the imagination to think that someone at his level would have such important information that he would have to be murdered to be kept silent. So what other theories are there? Because you cold water prosecutors keep putting theories out there and basically throwing them out as soon as we talk about them. Okay, we'll talk about another one then. Maybe Trevor was kidnapped as a bank employee by a criminal gang or paramilitary group to extract some codes or a ransom, something to that effect, but it all went wrong. He wasn't supposed to be killed. He was just supposed to be kind of a pawn in a greater scheme of bank fraud, but he was accidentally killed. Now, some people often dismiss the idea of a robbery because they affirm that it wasn't a bank full of money. But this is a bank asset management center. People underestimate the potential value of the documents or records that could have been in the building that night, even if it's not what you traditionally think of for a bank to have like a vault where you spin the big, locked wheel and you open it and it's just filled with gold coins and money. Might not be that, but it has a lot of documents that can be very valuable if in the wrong hands. So it's possible that Trevor had, again, accidentally stumbled across some sort of heist or other big kind of Ocean's 11 type fraud. And he was taken out, killed, so that he wouldn't alert or identify anyone who was part of this heist. Trevor had possibly turned up at the wrong time and interrupted, say, a stakeout. He went inside the gate after briefly talking to that man in black, and the man in black had believed that what Trevor was doing was going inside and alerting Peter, the night security guard, of the suspicious presence of this individual outside. Yet, when Trevor talked to his colleague inside the office, remember when he was in there having coffee with a colleague from about 3:36 a.m. until 4:03 a.m., he displayed no anxiety or fear at all. And he seemed to be in a great mood, in fact. He wasn't hurried or wanting to report something. He just wanted to wait out the rain and hang out because he had no one to go home to. If Trevor had realized something strange was going on, he surely would have mentioned it in that 30-minute span of time where he was behind a locked gate where there was security and there was no one threatening his life or threatening him to not report at that time. And if he'd really realized that he was in danger or something bad was happening, he could have actually just stayed in the building, right? Like if he thought that they were staking him out and they were going to wait for him, it's not like he ever had to leave the office building. It was a possibility for him to stay in there. The CCTV footage seems to show that the man in black had been expecting or maybe waiting for Trevor. He showed very little interest in Trevor's two colleagues who stopped briefly by the gate at 3:37 a.m. Those two colleagues seemed to be pretty drunk. They couldn't figure out a way to get into the gate and they kind of just left. But that man in black didn't really talk to them, didn't pay them any attention while Trevor was inside the building. So it could be that he was waiting for Trevor. It could be that if he were that worried, maybe he should have talked to the two colleagues, see when Trevor was going to come out. Was he calling someone in there? What's going on? But that doesn't seem to be what happened. I mean, it sounds really cool. And again, sounds like a movie, right? It sounds like really Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 12 or however many oceans there are at this point, which sounds like a really cool Mission Impossible sort of thing. But I don't know. And again, I don't know that Trevor would necessarily be the person with like the keys to the kingdom to be able to walk into this intense heist and know what's going on. Another theory is that Trevor had actually arranged to meet the man in black there for some reason. Maybe it was a sexual motive. This theory is actually more of a recent theory. Rewatching the CCTV footage from camera 1 again, Trevor's on the phone as he approaches and passes the man in black, who's also on the phone. So it's possible that they might have been on the phone with one another. It's also possible that the man in black was on the phone to an associate or a collaborator. And Trevor, in that first camera view, doesn't seem at all surprised or uncomfortable to find this guy standing alone in kind of an out-of-way place on a horribly wet and windy night, who's dressed from head to toe in black. Remember, Trevor kind of walks by and barely pays any attention to him. There is a small gap in time, maybe 20 seconds, between camera 1 and 2, where Trevor and the man in black are present in a blind spot, but out of view of both cameras. We asked this earlier. Were words exchanged then? Who said what? What did they talk about? They definitely talked briefly after, as we see on camera 2. Again, what were they talking about? Was it something that was arranged? Maybe they expected to see each other there. Maybe they didn't know that was the person they were supposed to meet. But, you know, when you like walk into a restaurant and you're supposed to be meeting someone, but you may not know what they look like, maybe you'll get on the phone and say, oh, wait, are you that person? So maybe that's why Trevor had walked by the man in black at first. Maybe he didn't know who he was looking for and then confirmed it. And if they were meeting, was it something arranged? And if so, was it for something like a sexual motive? But again, that seems really incredibly contrived. There's no indication that Trevor was attracted to men, but then again, Ireland was still only emerging from being a pretty conservative Catholic country back in 2000, so it might be the kind of thing that if you were attracted to someone of the same sex, you might hide it. So maybe Trevor was and didn't tell anyone. But the bigger problem here is it's hard to believe that the police wouldn't have located the man in black if he was on the phone with Trevor because they had cell phone data. So while at first looking at the camera views, it may seem like they're on the phone with each other or something like that, it would be hard for the man in black to go completely unidentified with all of Trevor's phone records.
Guys, as you know, the world of finance long been a target for criminals looking to make a quick buck. There's always something new out there, some new investment people are wanting you to invest in, get rich quick schemes and everything else in between. And with inflation going up, sometimes you feel like even the dollar bills in your pocket aren't worth as much as they used to be. So take my advice, protect your financial future and your privacy with something real and tangible. Gold and silver from our friends at Allegiance Gold.
Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA or 401k with physical gold and silver, or if you prefer, have it delivered securely right to your front door. Since the beginning of time, there's only one universal currency, and that's always of value, and that's gold. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry, 5 stars with TrustLink, a AAA rating with the Business Consumer Alliance, and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. You can invest with confidence because of the quality and service of Allegiance Gold. Get up to $5,000 in free silver on a qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithgoldnow.com today, or give them a call at 844-790-9191. Don't wait for your privacy to be taken away. Protect your future now with Allegiance Gold. Visit protectwithgoldnow.com or call 844-790-9191. Brett, being a homeowner is obviously a huge responsibility, but one of the things I find so difficult is finding the right people to make repairs around my home. Well, enter Angie. Angie's List is now Angie, and they've made it easier than ever to get all your home projects done right. Just the other day, I had this light flickering and I couldn't tell if it was my eyes or if it was an electrical issue. I didn't know an electrician. And so I got on Angie and was able to be pointed to a great electrician in my area. He came over the same day and everything is fixed. No more flickering light bulb. Angie has over 20 years of home service experience and they've combined it with new tools to simplify the whole process.
Just bring them your project online or with the Angie app, answer a few questions, and Angie can handle the rest from start to finish. Or help you see ratings and reviews, compare quotes from local pros, and connect instantly. Which means you can cross things off your to-do list in just a few taps. Because whether it's routine maintenance or a dream remodel, Angie is here to make it easy. So get your next project done with the help of a pro from Angie. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. Have you ever wondered why laundry detergent comes in massive plastic jugs? Who wants that? 91% of those inconvenient, awkward, heavy jugs end up in landfills and oceans, harming our planet and marine life. There has to be a better way, and it's not like you can just stop doing laundry. So do what we did. Switch to Earth Breeze. Earth Breeze laundry detergent eco sheets look like dryer sheets, but they're not. They are a revolutionary liquidless laundry detergent that dissolves 100% in any wash cycle, hot or cold. No measuring, no mess, and no heavy plastic jugs. Just toss the sheet in.
Brett, I mean, with 3 little kids at home, I really am running my washing machine every single day. We do at least one load, maybe multiple loads a day. And I was feeling so guilty about having to lug these big jugs of detergent from the store. It was hurting my back and it was filling up the landfills. Well, Earth Breeze has made the whole concept of detergent better. The packaging is lightweight, biodegradable, and plastic free. Great for all laundry lifestyles, even sensitive skin. I use it for my newborn baby and her skin seems to take it great. You don't have to pay exorbitant amounts to get special detergent for their sensitive skin because Earth Breeze is already made with hypoallergenic and dermatologist tested materials. Earth Breeze is compatible with HE, high efficiency washers, gray water systems, and is septic safe. They offer flexible subscriptions that can be adjusted, paused, or canceled by you at any time. No contracts or fees. And the best part, especially for me as a new mom, delivered right to your door via free carbon neutral shipping at a frequency you can set that works for your unique lifestyle. Most importantly, you still get a powerful clean. Earth Breeze is tough on stains, fights odors, and your clothes come out clean every time. That says a lot when you have very rambunctious boys as I do. Don't just take our word for it. You can try for yourself with their risk-free 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you don't like it, Earth Breeze will give you a full refund. No questions asked and no return necessary. Switch from the old-fashioned goo to something new. Right now, our listeners can subscribe to Earth Breeze and save 40%. Go to earthbreeze.com/prosecutors to get started. That's earthbreeze.com/prosecutors for 40% off. earthbreeze.com/prosecutors.
And that's one of the problems with this case is you go through these theories, and we've gone through a lot of them, and none of them are satisfying. None of them grab at you. You don't feel like, I mean, any of them are possible because there's so little evidence, but none of them feel that good. They don't seem to explain a lot of the issues. I mean, probably the one that comes the close is this is some sort of heist, maybe. And the man in black is there for some reason related to that. But when you talk about these theories, there's nothing in particular that feels strong, which is why we wanted to introduce an alternative theory. One might call it a conspiracy theory. I don't know. I don't know if I want to go that far. You may go that far. Alice may go that far.
I'll call it
but
that.
I think we have to go back to something we mentioned in the last episode. The person who might be responsible for Trevor's disappearance, in a way. Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, President of the United States for 8 years in the 90s. Bill Clinton, who we mentioned before, who was going to Dublin. What if he not only inadvertently hurt the investigation because of the cleanup around the area of his trip, which might have just, disposed of evidence or destroyed valuable information, but what if it was more than that? What if the two things, Trevor's disappearance and Bill Clinton's visit, were directly connected? Not because of something Bill Clinton did? What if whoever was trying to gain entrance into Trevor's building wasn't trying to rob it? What if they wanted a base from which to launch an assassination attempt? Now, before you say this is crazy, we're going to talk. We're going way back. We're going to lay the foundation for this, and then come back to this theory, this assassination attempt
for this
theory.
history theory. This is such a good history theory.
So, and to understand why this is possible, you have to know something about Irish history. The thing that I think probably even most people in Ireland don't understand is Americans are kind of obsessed with Ireland in a weird way, in this weird sort of strange way. And in college, I was obsessed with Irish history. So you guys know I was a history major, and I did mostly American history, but I also did a lot of Irish history and history of Britain in general, became sort of fascinated by it. And that's sort of, I think, one of the reasons that this just immediately jumped to mind for me, where maybe it doesn't jump to mind for other people. But let's talk about Ireland. Let's put on our history hats and talk about Ireland. Ireland, as you guys know, the entire island for a very long time was part of the United Kingdom. Today it's called the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, why is that? Why Northern Ireland? Well, before 1916, you could drop the northern part. Ireland had been under the control of England for several hundred years, and despite attempted rebellions seemingly every generation, it appeared it might always be. But then in 1916, you had a small group of students and poets who launched an uprising on Easter 1916. They were quickly defeated, as they knew they would be. These guys were like idealist to the utmost. Patrick Pearse was their leader, and he had this theory that the only way that Irish rebellion could ever happen is with some sacrifice, and they were willing to sacrifice themselves. And the British just fell right into this trap because they arrested these guys. The uprising is defeated. It's kind of like Les Mis, where they're all thinking the people of Paris are going to rise, and then the sun rises and there's nobody there, and they all get killed. That's basically what happened. But the leaders were arrested, and they were executed in sort of a very famous series of executions in Kilmainham jail, just outside of Dublin. And this was a really bad thing. This was a bad decision by the British. If they had just sort of put these guys in prison and let them out after a little while, things might have been fine. But they immediately became heroes, martyrs across all of Ireland. Britain's in the middle of World War I. So it's not like they can really deal with a rebellion just across the strait. And they were ill-equipped to deal with this. And this group of fighters, this ragtag group of fighters, called themselves the Irish Republican Army. And the fighting continued for about 5 years. When the war in Europe was over, however, Britain directed more and more of its attention to the problems in Ireland. And the popular opinion in Ireland was that the IRA was winning the war and they were holding their own. But they had some pretty serious problems at this point, including with an ammunition supply and the simple fact that Britain was able to send more and more men to the island. But the British were really sick of fighting. World War I had been really rough. They lost a lot of people. They wanted to make a deal. The Irish couldn't keep fighting. The British didn't want to. A deal was made, and the consequences are felt to this day. 26 of the predominantly Catholic counties were granted independence. They became the Free State of Ireland. But 6 counties, made up mostly of Protestants, would remain part of Great Britain. Some pro-independence forces felt betrayed, and there was a civil war that followed. And even when that civil war ended, the IRA continued to launch attacks. The IRA, which had been the Irish Republican Army, which had been the arm of revolution, was eventually banned in the Republic as a terrorist group. The IRA, though, remains. They name themselves the Provisional IRA or the Provos, and these attacks escalate in the 1960s, leading to something called the Troubles. And for 30 years, there was an undeclared war raging in Northern Ireland. Massive bombings by both the IRA and the Protestant Ulster Defense Association were killing hundreds of people, including Lord Mountbatten. We're going to talk more about him, who was the last Viceroy of India, by the way, and the man for whom Prince William's latest son was named. Enter Bill Clinton. So that's a lot of history. That's like 500 years of history in a few minutes. But essentially, it is hard for people to imagine what Ireland was like in the 80s and 90s. you talked about Belfast and Beirut in the same breath. It was not the lovely, wonderful place to visit it is now. It was an ongoing war in a lot of ways. People were getting blown up and killed. Tens of thousands of people were killed, and it was a real problem. It's just hard to imagine that that kind of situation was going on in Ireland in the 80s and 90s, but it was. And Bill Clinton, who had some Irish ancestry, and as I said, Americans are all obsessed with Ireland, he comes in and he is going to change this.
So the most consequential action of Clinton's presidency may be his commitment to ending the Troubles. And his trip to Ireland in 1994 is widely credited by forces on both sides as beginning the peace process that culminated in the Good Friday Agreement on April 10th, 1998. The paramilitary groups laid down their arms and the Troubles came to an end. It's really difficult to understate Clinton's contribution here, and he became close to the leaders of Sinn Féin and the IRA. When Martin McGuinness, the former commander of the IRA, died in 2017, Clinton spoke at his funeral in Derry. In an 11-minute eulogy, Clinton compared McGuinness to Nelson Mandela. And when it was over, Clinton, just to emphasize the complexity of all of this, the Queen sent a message of condolence to McGuinness's widow, and she had famously shook hands with McGuinness in 2012. Lord Louis Mountbatten, who we mentioned earlier, was the Queen's cousin, and he'd been the first Sea Lord, the head of the British military, the supreme Allied commander in Southeast Asia during World War II, and the final Viceroy of India. He also patented a polo stick. He'd basically raised King Charles III. In fact, he'd been the one to introduce Elizabeth and Philip. Charles would eventually propose to Mountbatten's granddaughter, though she refused him, in large part due to the fact that she's still reeling from Mountbatten's untimely death. Now, Prince William would eventually name his youngest son after Mountbatten. It was McGuinness who ordered his assassination during a fishing trip in County Sligo in 1979 that also killed his two nephews. After the bombing, the IRA issued a statement saying, quote, "The IRA claim responsibility for the execution of Lord Louis Mountbatten. This operation is one of the discriminate ways we can bring to the attention of the English people the continuing occupation of our country. The death of Mountbatten and the tributes paid to him will be seen in sharp contrast to the apathy of the British government and the English people to the deaths of over 300 British soldiers and the deaths of Irish men, women, and children at the hands of their forces."
Yeah, and this is the guy that Clinton is eulogizing. And this is such a complex situation. It's just hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that you could have this, as we said, going on, and then you have this peace accord, and then everybody's just friends, and the Queen is shaking hands with the man who did this and said this. And as far as the United States goes, this is another thing I don't know if people in Ireland are really familiar with. The people in the United States have a really weird relationship with the IRA. So the IRA, as you can tell, is, and I hope nobody blows me up for saying this, is a terrorist organization. I mean, that's what it is. And it very clearly was killing people. But in the United States, it was seen as this sort of freedom fighting group, particularly in places like Boston, where IRA fundraisers would go to bars in Boston. There's just great stories about this. They just show up in bars and take up a collection for the boys, which were the guys who were fighting these battles. And IRA members would come to the United States and buy weapons and then bring them back to Ireland. One of the slogans was the ballot and the Armalite, which was how they were going to win. They were going to win through elections. Sinn Féin was going to take over, and they were going to win through the use of the Armalite, which is an AR. That's where the AR comes from, an AR-15. So they were committed to this fight through the 80s and 90s until eventually they decided on peace. And it wasn't just McGuinness, who was the leader of this paramilitary group. It was also Gary Adams, who was the political leader, the leader of Sinn Féin. He would say, "The IRA gave clear reasons for the execution. I think it is unfortunate that anyone has to be killed, but the furor created by Mountbatten's death showed up the hypocritical attitude of the media establishment. As a member of the House of Lords, Mountbatten was an emotional figure in both British and Irish politics. What the IRA did to him is what Mountbatten had been doing all his life to other people. And with his war record, I don't think he would have objected to dying in what was clearly a war situation. He knew the danger involved in coming to this country. In my opinion, the IRA achieved its objective. People started paying attention to what was happening in Ireland. And it turns out the assassination was actually a coordinated attack. On the same day, IRA members ambushed and killed 18 British soldiers in County Down. And the parties responsible for these attacks were eventually arrested. They were all released as part of the Good Friday Accords. And once again, try and imagine this. Most of you who are listening to this are Americans. Try to imagine if something similar happened. If, like, you know, the Secretary of Defense was fishing in Canada and the Quebecois revolutionaries took him out for free French Quebec and issued this kind of statement, and political leaders issued this kind of statement. Imagine the response from the United States, what it would be. And oh, by the way, after doing that, then killed a bunch of American soldiers. It's just mind-blowing. It's hard to even imagine something like that happening. But it was happening in Ireland in the 70s and in the 80s and up until the 90s when they reached this peace agreement. But here's the thing about the peace agreement. They reached a peace agreement, but they didn't solve the underlying problem. You still have Northern Ireland. And there were plenty of people who had dedicated their lives to this war because that's what they viewed it. You know, if you listen to Gary Adams, I mean, he's telling you, Jerry Adams, I think is how they actually pronounce his name. He's telling you, like, look, this is a war. The IRA is saying the same thing. Not everybody was ready to just let this go. So the IRA disbanded as part of this agreement, though lots of people think the IRA is still around. But at that point, the real IRA was formed. On August 15th, 1998, the real IRA set off a bomb in Omagh, Northern Ireland. It killed 29 people and injured 300 more. And so, when Clinton visited Ireland in 2000, he made a point of stopping in Dundalk, which was a real IRA stronghold, and in fact, the place where the leader of the real IRA lived. So that's sort of the situation you've got in 2000. You've got the real IRA who was very unhappy with the fact that there's peace. You have the architect of that peace coming to Ireland. And not only is he coming to Ireland, he's going to thumb his nose in the face of the real IRA. And it makes you wonder if maybe somebody in the real IRA decided, we want to make a point. We want to do something spectacular. So where does Trevor come in all this? Well, there's some things we want to talk about. The key, the building, the route, and the chain. These are the four things that I think are important to this theory, to this insane theory of mine. The first, the key. So, Trevor is someone who works at this bank. Imagine for a second the man in black is a real IRA person who wants, for whatever reason, to get into the building. What is he going to need? He's going to need a key. And so maybe you imagine he's scoping out the place, trying to find a way in. Obviously, the IRA was very well organized. The way they executed Mountbatten, the way they coordinated that with an attack on British soldiers, this was a group of people who knew how to do things. You could imagine that one of those people or a group of those people were actually staking out this party, looking for a target, someone who could get them into the building. Trevor just randomly happens to be the one person who by himself is walking back to that building where the man in black is waiting. What happens as Trevor is walking back to the building? The man in black gets a phone call. When he gets that phone call, he steps off into the street and looks down in the direction of Trevor. He then allows Trevor to pass him, doesn't say a thing to him, lets him pass him, then he turns and follows him. He actually ends up passing Trevor at some point between these two cameras, but he just casually keeps going and then hangs out in front of the back gate, the entrance to this building. Says something to Trevor, but he's very casual about it. Trevor starts looking for his key. What does the man in black do? He looks over his shoulder and watches him. Sees that he gets his key, sees that he can get in through the gate, lets him go through. He's not going to follow him in. He's smart enough not to do that. He knows there will be security. He's not going to do that. But he now knows that Trevor has access to the building. Why the building is important, we'll come to in a second. He knows Trevor has access to the building. Then you see Trevor leave. Then you see that video and you see someone who appears to be the man in black and possibly an accomplice who is a woman and possibly an accomplice in a vehicle who passed Trevor. After you see those three things, you never see Trevor again. And it feels as though he may have disappeared. So why would they want access to the building? Well, let's talk about the route. Let's talk about where Bill Clinton went when he went to Dublin. This is going to make more sense to those of you who are from Dublin, but we will put these maps up on the website so you guys can see it. So Clinton, he begins his trip in Phoenix Park, which is a big park in the middle of Dublin. He lands there in Marine One, and it's right where the U.S. ambassador's residence is located. So he lands there on Tuesday, December 12th, 2000, very soon after this party that Trevor went to. From there, he gets in a vehicle and travels to the president's house, the president of Ireland, who is also located in Phoenix Park. The president is the ceremonial head of government. He's kind of like the queen. Hopefully it's not offensive to everybody in Ireland, but he's kind of like the queen in that he represents the state, but he doesn't have political power. So he hangs out with the president for a little while. Then they get in a car and they travel to visit the Taoiseach, which is the actual political leader of Ireland. It's named after sort of an ancient word for leader in Gaelic. So they go to visit him. His name is Bertie Ahern, and he's the actual leader of Ireland. So the president, more like the king or queen of England. This guy, more like the president of the United States. And then after this meeting, Clinton goes off and visits the Guinness Brewery, has some Guinnesses, and then he heads back to Phoenix Park. So why are we talking about all this? If you look at a map of this path that he takes, Clinton is driving in a motorcade. And to get to the Taoiseach's office, and from it to the Guinness storehouse, the motorcade would have to have traveled within 100 yards of the building where Trevor worked. It is, if you look at the map, very, very close. And this would give you an opportunity if you were in the IRA. If you're in the real IRA, there's a couple things you can sort of imagine they might do. One of them is try and take a shot at Clinton. That's probably not going to work. It would be very difficult to pull that off. But what are they known for doing? Car bombs. So you could imagine that you would want to put yourself in a situation where you can see the approaching motorcade, possibly from the top of this building. You're close to the route, but not so close that maybe you would be uncovered. You set up a bomb somewhere, you set off the bomb. That's how you do the assassination attempt. A couple things that could have happened. Obviously, that didn't happen. Clinton visited. He had a great time. He thumbed his nose at the real IRA. He flew back home. And that was basically the end of his presidency. This was the last thing he did as president, sort of a celebration of everything he had accomplished in Ireland. Well, there's a couple possibilities. One is that killing Trevor to get that key was actually something that raised the heat so much on them, they decided to abandon this entire operation. That is one possibility. But the other possibility is the chain. So the fourth thing. So we talked about the key, we talked about the building, we talked about the route, let's talk about the chain. What the man in black would not have known is that there was also a chain. And that if the chain was on the gate, you couldn't get in with the key. By the time he got there, the chain had actually been taken off for a delivery. There had been a delivery to the building. The security had taken off the chain, and for whatever reason, they never put it back on. And that's the only reason that Trevor was actually able to get in, because the chain wasn't back on. It's also possible that this entire thing fell apart because they got the key, but it wasn't enough. And that when they got there to try and get into the building to set all this up, they couldn't actually do it because the chain was on and there was no way to get it off without calling security. Trevor could have done that. If he had gotten there and the chain had been on, he could have called security. He obviously works there. They would have let him in. They wouldn't let these people in. If they actually had to interact with someone in security, that would have been a huge problem for this entire plot. And you could imagine the entire plot falls apart. So, in short, that is my conspiracy theory. In long, that is my conspiracy theory about why these people wanted to get in. It was an IRA operation that went wrong. And the one other thing I'll say about this, we've talked about the body a lot, and we've talked about how nobody ever found the body. Well, when Bill Clinton gave that long eulogy at Martin McGuinness's funeral, there was one group of people in particular who were very upset. They were the families of the disappeared. And the disappeared are what we call the people in Ireland who were kidnapped, murdered, and then their bodies disposed of by the IRA over the course of the Troubles. This happened a lot. There are hundreds and hundreds of these people. The IRA was very good at it. If you want to learn more about this, there's a terrific book called Say Nothing, which is told from the perspective of a lot of people who were in the IRA, that talks about some of these instances of these disappeared people who the IRA showed up, they grabbed them, they never saw them again. If there was anybody who could do this, if there was anybody who could grab Trevor and get rid of him such that he would never be found, it was the IRA.
Brett, that was awesome. Because here's the thing. We have as much evidence really of this theory as all the other ones because of the lack of evidence all around, except you really do put some flavor with the IRA, which is a real, this was all bubbling up around this time. So wait, so is your theory that they were going to get inside and park the car bomb inside the gate because the rest of the streets would be cleared for the motorcade?
So the way they did it, and like the way they did it with Mountbatten, is they would plant the bomb. I mean, they would occasionally do timed bombs. So the Armagh bombing was a timed bomb. There's a picture which some of you will have seen that will be in one of our videos, probably this one, of a father and a son standing in front of a car in Armagh, and the picture is taken. That is the bomb, the car. Both the father and son survived, but that's the car that eventually exploded a couple hours later. That was one way they did it. That would not have been effective here because you wouldn't know exactly when Clinton was passing through. What you would have needed is a spotter. So with Mountbatten, for instance, the way they killed him is they had a guy who was on the shore, and he was watching Mountbatten through his binoculars, waiting for the right moment. The boat gets out into the middle of the water. They had already planted a bomb in the boat, and then he blew it up through remote control. So what I'm imagining is you plant a bomb along the route. You get into that building, which is close, but not so close that it would necessarily be taken over by the Secret Service. You get to the top of the building, you wait until the motorcade comes through at the right spot, then you detonate the bomb remotely. And so that's how you'd pull it off. I had a weird instance one time when I was working in the state. Hillary Clinton visited as part of her campaign, and she was visiting Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, which was right across the street from where I worked. And I was at work that day looking out the window of my building, and Hillary Clinton was standing in the street, like just underneath me. And obviously, I would never do anything to anyone, including Hillary Clinton. But I was sitting there thinking, this is a real security breach because I'm just here. Like, nobody checked me as I came into the building today. And there's Hillary Clinton right there, So while the Secret Service does a great job of securing locations, they can only do so much. And I would imagine that this is far enough away that if you could get into there, you could pull this off without anybody noticing. Now, could you plant the bomb? That would be the harder part. It's possible they just also never were able to do that. That they had the key, they thought they had a way in, but they were never able to plant a bomb due to all the security considerations in a place where they could pull this off. So that is one possibility. And look, is there evidence, quote unquote, to support this? No, other than the fact, to me, this seems like it was targeted at Trevor. It was pulled off very cleanly with no evidence whatsoever. And Clinton's arrival in Dublin was so close in time to this that it is a conspiracy theory. But, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if something crazy like this is what happened. So if one day I'm getting into my car and it blows up, you'll know we were right.
Oh, well, we'll talk about car bombs and where you're from at some point in one of these episodes, I'm sure. But I like your conspiracy theory. I agree. There's really no evidence of it. And to me, it stretches it a little bit that they can be so coordinated and so good at pulling off the kidnapping and then disappearance and murder of Trevor, but have it go nowhere. It just seems like that was so well executed that for the rest of the plan to fall apart. But maybe that's how the IRA rolls. Like, we get as far as we can, and people are disposable. Trevor's disposable, even if we weren't 100% sure that this would lead us to success in our assassination plan. So it could be that. It just seems like it's such a well-coordinated plot that it seems unlikely that it would just fall so far short of achieving the end goal. But let me maybe take a spin on your conspiracy theory for a slightly less conspiratorial possibility that still involves a lot of the historical importance of Northern Ireland and the IRA as you have laid it out. Maybe this was not about assassinating Clinton. Maybe it was just about making money. Trevor's disappearance was a year after the Good Friday Agreement, but could have been a dissident IRA group looking desperately for funding, perhaps the real IRA. And as a bank employee, the real IRA might have seen Trevor as having some sort of ransom value, no matter his role in the company. The IRA have been known to kidnap for ransom to fund activities. And the IRA is good at this kind of thing, like we've kind of talked about. On December 20th, 2004, for instance, a group believed to be a part of the real IRA pulled off a £25.6 million robbery of the Northern Bank in Belfast. So there's some historical credence to them being able to pull off something like this and to use kidnappings as a way to fund activities. The only problem here, of course, is that there was never any ransom demand for Trevor. He is relatively low on the totem pole in terms of someone having value, and it didn't actually lead to any money that we know of going out the door for anybody related to Trevor or not.
Yeah, I think if it was for money, it was still to get in. I think access to the building was why this happened. I don't think this was a random attack. I think the man in black is responsible, or is part of the group who is responsible. I think they coordinated this. I think there's a reason they weren't interested in the two people. You know, the two guys who show up later, the man in black shows no interest in them. I think they had already identified Trevor for whatever reason. He was alone, and he was the one they were going to go after, and they wanted to get into that building. Why exactly is hard to say. Could have been there was some sort of value there that we're not thinking of. There wasn't gold in that bank, but there would have been valuable things, and maybe they knew that. Just to keep going back to movies and stuff, if you guys have ever seen Justified, great show, love that show. Last season, there's a bank robbery where all they steal is documents. They don't steal any money. They just steal documents because they know the documents are valuable. It's a similar thing here where, for whatever reason it is, they want to get in that building. And Trevor is the key, and has the key, has the literal key. And like I said, I don't know why, but you'll never convince me that this was an accident for all the reasons we said. And you'll never convince me that this was a random act of violence for all the reasons we said. So I think this was an organized attack. It's also possible a lot of the IRA members basically turned into a mafia afterwards. Once the sort of political reasons died away, they used their skills to do things like run the drug operation or the gambling operations or whatever in various places in Ireland. So it's possible that it is something like that it is the IRA, but not the real IRA, and not for any sort of political purpose, but just for some sort of monetary thing. So that's what I think happened. I think there is some connection there. I don't know what it is. If you're somebody who used to be in the IRA and you want to reach out and let us know if you think our idea is plausible,
Please don't blow us up.
love to hear from you. Don't blow us up. That will just confirm the theory, and you don't want to do that. So,
You want to do the opposite of that.
exactly.
You
We'll do the
clean.
opposite of that. Right. And, hey, we're all about Irish independence here on The Prosecutors. So. Oh, man.
I don't know. I like
Yeah.
this. I do like this theory. I think it's interesting. And really, at bottom, there's no evidence because I do think this is targeted because of the complete lack of evidence. Crimes are hard to pull off completely undetected, and it takes planning ahead of time. And the fact that there is so little evidence is evidence, I think, to me, that it was coordinated and it was targeted.
So that's our theories. We don't really have any great ones. I mean, we have some good ones, but maybe not any that have a lot of evidence behind them. Love to hear what you guys think. prosecutorspod@gmail.com is our email, @prosecutorspod for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Join the gallery so you can discuss this and other cases with us. And hello to all of you on Patreon, listening early and ad-free. We love you guys. Enjoy so much discussing some of these cases live with you on our YouTubes and our Get Vocals, though those have been kind of a disaster lately. And
We try, though.
in all the different ways. We try. We want to see your faces, and we want you to see our faces. So thank you guys for being so supportive. Hey guys, this is Brett with a quick follow-up. When we finished this episode, I thought to myself, are people going to think we're crazy? Are they going to say, the owl theory was one thing, but now they've lost the plot? And look, if you thought that, I can understand. Would the IRA really try and blow up a bomb in the middle of a presidential visit? Well, you know, it's funny how history repeats itself. Very recently, in April of 2023, President Biden visited Northern Ireland, and I have an article I'm going to read to you. The headline, IRA terror plot foiled in Northern Ireland ahead of President Biden visit. Police in Northern Ireland have thwarted an IRA terror bomb plot intended to disrupt President Biden's upcoming visit to Belfast on Tuesday. Members of the paramilitary group, the New IRA, were allegedly looking to purchase bomb parts in Derry and scheming to build an explosive device to disrupt Biden's diplomatic stopover. The belief is that the New IRA was planning some sort of attack to coincide with Biden's visit. Last November, the group claimed responsibility for detonating a roadside bomb targeting a police vehicle in County Tyrone. Thomas Mellon, the leader of the New IRA, wanted a quote-unquote spectacular way to undermine Biden's visit. So my question for you is this a coincidence? Is this a new idea? Or is it a rehashing of an old plot that at some point went wrong? Something to think about. Thanks for listening. Well, Alice, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
This has been fun, Brett. I can't believe we made it through your theory in this episode, but look at us being short-winded.
There you go. Look at us. Look at us. We're so great. Well, as we sail off through the foggy dew, next week we'll be back with another case, new questions, maybe new answers. We'll see. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Shocking. Okay, I'm recording and you're on speaker.
Testing. Man, it's a bad start.
Anytime you want to start that over.
Oh man. Phew. I'm drinking this bourbon and it's like,
are you gonna do testing or not?
I just did it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard the clink of the glass. I was like, maybe he's like 3 drinks in, you know? I don't know.
It's like, it's this glass or this, well, it's the whiskey I won at the Secret Santa thing, that party.
Oh, is it good whiskey?
Not really.
Oh.
Kind of tastes like rubbing alcohol.
I guess there was like a whatever dollar limit. But you could still get really good whiskey for $30.
See what's streaming free all month long during Amplify AAPI Voices on PlutoTV. Watch shows like Kim's Convenience with Simu Liu and amazing movies like Meet the Patels and Jason Momoa in Braven. Plus, Pluto TV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies and TV shows available on live and on demand. Download Pluto TV on all your favorite devices for free. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.